Good evening, board members, Dr. McCord, staff, and members of the community who are watching us on live stream. It is Tuesday, June the 9th, and this is the Gilbert Schools Governing Board work study session and brief board meeting. We have several items on our regular board meeting short agenda, and we have a couple of items on our work study session. However, before we begin, I would like to make a brief statement, and please understand that I speak as an individual. I do not presume to speak on behalf of each and every board member. However, at the conclusion of my statement, they are certainly free to endorse the statement should they desire to do so. In thinking of the events of this week and the last 2 weeks exactly, I felt compelled to pen something and to address it. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the events that enveloped our community, our state, our nation, and indeed the world. The struggle for equality and justice has been a part of this nation's history since its infancy. As a society, we must continue to strive to become that more perfect union we all desire. Gilbert Public Schools is not immune to the challenges that have sparked the protests that have occurred throughout our country. We must always seek to establish a climate and a culture that is inclusive and just. We must become a community that honors and respects the contributions of all people, regardless of their social economic status. A community is rich when it embraces its capacity to utilize the skills and the talents of all individuals. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step towards the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertion and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. In recent days and weeks, we have all watched events that have reminded us that the progress we have made as a society is not enough. We have witnessed the passionate demonstration of people of all races and ethnic backgrounds joined together and demanding equality and justice for all people. In the words Black Lives Matter, we have been reminded that there is still a great deal of work that must be done to establish that more perfect union in our schools, our communities, our state, and in our nation. The Gilbert Unified School District is deeply committed to fostering and embracing the ideals of social justice, equality, and inclusiveness. We reject and repudiate the discrimination, hate, and racism in all its forms. We will continue to promote and endorse the positive efforts of students, educators, parents, and community members to establish a climate and a culture on all of our campuses that honors and respects the dignity and worth of all human beings. In closing, I would like to echo Desmond Tutu. Exclusion is never the way forward on our shared paths to freedom and justice. The events of the past days and weeks, sparked by the death of George Floyd, should serve to remind us that our work is not finished until we truly accept the truth that America is beautiful, rich, because of its diversity. Thank you. We will now move to our work study session. We'll call that portion of the agenda together.
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Yes, Ms. Uggetti.
Thank you for those words.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I would like to do the same. Thank you for taking the time to convey what many are feeling. It's been a great opportunity the last couple of weeks to reflect on our own belief systems and the way that we treat other people. And we acknowledge, as you have so eloquently done, the need for the golden rule and to treat other people with kindness, love, and respect.
Thank you, Mr. Carr.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I would just like to concur. That was very eloquently said.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphreys.
And I as well, Dr. Santa Cruz, thank you for your thoughts. They represent how I feel as well.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. And we appreciate that support from each of the board members for a statement that is so critical and I think reflects and represents the sentiment that is held by those who are working for the students in our district.
Dr. Sanders, can I say a word?
Yes, Dr. McCord.
First, thank you for your words. I know exactly where they come from, knowing you for the last 20 years. And as an administrator, as a human being, and as a friend, for those of you that don't know you in that capacity, please know that every single letter in that statement was from the heart. So again, thank you. And I appreciate our governing board members, all of you, for recognizing what this country's going through, what this state, what this town, and what this school district is going through. By no means have we looked in a different direction. We have a lot of work to do in Gilbert Public Schools, and I want to make sure that I recognize that publicly to anybody out there watching or that will see this later. We had opportunities already to speak with students at Highland High School on Monday, and we gained a lot of information and a lot of understanding of what just a handful of students go through, not just at that school, but in all of our schools on a daily basis. And I stated in my letter on Thursday, moving forward, we're going to do a lot of listening to begin with, because formulating a plan without listening is just a waste of time. So as we move through the next month and a half, we'll be putting together teams to be able to listen to our students, to our families, to make sure that we understand what the issues are in Gilbert Public Schools, so we can make sure we take care of not just those students, but all of our students. So again, thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz and governing board members.
Thank you, Dr. McCord, and my apologies. I should have recognized you from the onset in my rush to get the statement read. I failed to do that, but I appreciate those remarks, and I know you and the team will be working hard to make sure that we touch as many bases as we know to touch during this critical time. So we move to our work study portion. Say again.
Do we need a roll call, Gabby?
I think we're okay, but go ahead, Ms. Wilson. Go ahead and call.
No, you're good. I read that wrong. I thought call to order. I'm reading it, so you're up.
That's okay. So we move to item 2, a presentation and discussion of, and there are 2 topics on the work study session tonight. Item 2.01 is task force update, and item 2.02 is Global Academy update. Dr. McCord, your introductory remarks, please.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. Tonight, we will have our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Newman. She is heading up our task force, and within our task force, we have several subcommittees. I know over the past couple of weeks in particular, everybody's been working extremely hard. Just for the public, I know that school districts maybe surrounding us or down in the East Valley or in the Valley in general are coming out with their plans. and I'm happy for them. But we also take the approach of looking at every angle that we possibly can, making sure we had input from our staff as well as our parents to make the most informed decision as possible. We sent out an email on Friday, I believe, that just kind of give everybody an update of where we're at. And as situations change related to COVID-19 throughout the weeks, we want to make sure that our plan is as yet fluid as possible moving forward. So I'm very happy with where the committee is at today, and we're looking forward to it. I know in the past, when we talked about this, we said we would present on June 23rd. We would like to extend that deadline to June 30th in order to give the committees ample time to put together all the information needed to open up as safely and securely as possible for our students and staff. So, Dr. Newman, you're up.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members, and Dr. Board. First and foremost, thank you for this opportunity for us to share with you the progress of the committee, as well as some of the considerations that have been made. And before I formally move to my presentation slides, I'd like to ask Dawn, please, to share with you the results that she has compiled, some of the summary for our surveys. First and foremost, that is most important, as Dr. McCord mentioned. And so thank you, Dawn. If you would begin, that'd be great.
Thank you, Dr. Newman. I'm going to start by sharing the employee survey results, beginning with a quick summary. We sent the staff, all staff at Gilbert Public Schools, the survey via email on May 31st and followed up with a reminder June 3rd. The total number of staff as of May 31st was 4,398, and we received total number of responses was 3,420. In the slides that follow, I can show you a little bit more detail, but here are some of the key pieces that came out of that survey. We did ask staff where they had been working during the school closure. 71% had reported that they had been working from home, and 29% had been working a combination of on-site and home or on-site completely. We asked all of our employees their level of concern with returning to campuses and offices. 30% reported no concerns, 45% moderate concerns, and 25% very concerned. I'll show you a slightly more detailed slide in a moment, but we shared a range of measures that may be put in place to support a return to our campuses and offices for employees. And we asked our employees to respond how they felt about the importance of each of these measures. Increased sanitization and health screening were by far the top measures. So with the largest number of employees reporting these as very important as part of their consideration and comfort with returning to work and on our campuses and offices and in our offices. We also asked about preferred teaching model. This was around the 3 scenarios that were presented to you by Dr. Newman at the last governing board meeting, stressing that these are not in stone, but these are the scenarios that are being researched by the task force. And by far the most favored model was for students to attend school full time. Here's a breakdown. We asked our employees the departments or school that they work in, their role, where they had been working during the closure, and their current level of concern for returning to work on campus and in offices. And here are the different measures we asked for feedback on. There was 8 measures, and we asked the employees to mark whether these were very important to them for their return, somewhat important, or not important. As you can see, number 3 and 4 are health screening, and number 7 is regular and visible sanitization. And again, this is the data that we received with regards to their favored teaching models. And the number one preference there with close to 2,000 votes was students attending school in person full-time with appropriate safety measures in place. We, as part of both surveys, we did provide ample space for employees and parents to provide their feedback. It was very important for us for them to have their voices heard and for them to be able to share their thoughts and opinions. Some of the themes in the comments that we received from employees, noting the importance of support for high-risk employees and those with health issues. Concerns were raised regarding shared offices and spaces and how that might work. The need for cleaning products in classrooms and for teachers to have access to these. Questions over what happens if there is a positive case of COVID-19 on campus or in a department. How to achieve social distancing on campus. The need for clear expectations. It was stated multiple times that the feeling that kids need to be back in schools and the importance of supporting our students with special needs. I'll now move on to the parent survey results. The survey was sent to all parents Monday, June 1st via email. That's a total of 41,000 parents, and a reminder was sent out on June 3rd. We asked the parents to complete one survey per student, and the total responses received reflecting 22,405 students. Again, we asked our parents to gauge their level of concern with returning to school in person in August. 42% no concerns, 39% reported moderate concerns, and 19% very concerned. We also shared a number of measures that may be put in place, and by far the rather than rate it as very important, somewhat important, or not important, we asked our parents to respond to each measure based on whether it would make it more likely, less likely to send their child back to school in person, or if the measure wouldn't impact their decision either way. By far, the measure that was most likely to support them sending their student back to school in person was health screenings for employees and students. And again, similar to the employee survey results, the preferred teaching model out of the three scenarios was for students to attend school full time, and this was 67%. And this just shows the levels of concern. And here is the part in more detail with the 11 measures that were presented that we were exploring, including physical distancing, limiting the number of volunteers and visitors on campus. As you can see, 5 and 6 in blue, more likely to support sending students back to school in person. 5 is employees having daily health screenings, and 6 is students having daily health screenings. And here, as I noted earlier, based on current family situation and personal concerns about safety and health, if you could choose a learning model for your child next school year, would you choose? And we have 67% choosing attend school in person full time with appropriate precautions in place. We also asked questions around riding a bus to school. 30% responded that the child does ride a bus to school, and these are the responses regarding whether or not they would choose for their child to ride the bus at the beginning of the new school year. And we have 60% yes, 33% maybe with appropriate safety precautions, and 8% no. Again, we sought to provide ample space for our community to share their views and opinions with regard to this. And we did receive over 8,000 individual comments from parents, which was incredible and very helpful. Here is a summary of some of the themes that came up. The importance, it was very frequently stated, the importance of balancing safety precautions with the mental health and well-being of our students. Also that returning to school may be create vulnerabilities for high-risk students and family members, and that there needs to be options. Questions around how health screening would actually work. The need to ensure no more breaks in students' education as they have perhaps already suffered academically. Concerns over the number of students in a classroom and how that might work. Again, similar to mirroring what we saw in the employee survey, it was iterated many times that kids need to be back in schools, that we need to support students with special needs. And again, we heard from a lot of parents commenting, please make the return as normal as possible. And that concludes my sharing from the employee and parent survey.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm going to, governing board members, do you have any questions about the survey before we get into the presentation?
Dr. Newman, just a clarification for me. The number of, the percentage of folks who on the teacher and staff side said normal as usual, and the number percentage-wise of folks who said normal as usual, I think it was pretty close, if I recall. It was 19 or 20 or something.
Dawn, can you give those specifics?
Yep. So for the, can you clarify what you mean by normal as usual? Do you mean returning to students on campus?
Yes.
Yep. So for the parent survey, it was 67% responded to be back in person. And I'm going to have to go back and check the data check the presentation just for one moment to confirm what it was for employees. It was close to, I'll have to check the percentage, but it was close to 2,000 out of 3,420 responses. So I will follow up with you with the exact percentage.
Okay, but they were close, is that right?
Yes, and in both instances, it was the clear front runner preferred return to school would be in person on campus.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Dr. Newman.
Thank you.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, I'm going to share then my presentation. There we go. So as you can tell, we're very impressed with the responses that we received, and we know obviously that it's so important that we listen to our community in regard to making some decisions, and that really goes along with what our guiding principles are. So I just wanted to start the presentation just reviewing some of those. We know again that we're obligated to serve our students even during those times of disruption. So it's important for us to look at all scenarios to make sure that we are ready to serve our students and our families in any way that we find ourselves necessary. We also need to be sure that we're meeting the needs of all students, including those that have specific learning or other needs, whether that be their situation at home, students with disabilities, and our English language learners. And then lastly, as I had mentioned, our decisions are best made when we consult those closest to the problem. So we do appreciate all of the feedback that we received. With that too, we are going to operate again on assumptions. We will be reopening in 2021 school year. We know that there may be some modifications that are needed based on guidance from national and state health officials. And we are going to create plans that take into account both short and long-term solutions. And I wanted to spend a little bit more time as we really started working through our subcommittees and talking daily at our leadership meetings and working with our advisory committees as well. We really were able to perhaps clarify what some of these scenarios might look like. So scenario A would be our return to campus full-time and putting some safety precautions in place. Our scenario C would be our online instruction utilizing Gilbert Public Schools Global Academy. And we know that as we move through this process, we will probably be hiring or relocating some of the staffing so that we are able to meet the needs of students if our numbers are what perhaps the survey suggests, and we'll need to hire more teachers. And then lastly, our blended learning model really is more of students that are attending full-time, and then there's a disruption in their life, whether that be specifically related to their health or their home, or something happens in the state or otherwise. So we need to be able to seamlessly move from our scenario A to our scenario B, and that's where our conversations have been for all of our various subcommittees. Again, these are our subcommittees. We moved from initially thinking we were going to need 11, and Mr. Ryan and his team very, very wisely decided that we probably need to separate one of those committees into two. So all of the subcommittee leaders are here during this evening on our WebEx presentation. So at the end, if you have any specific questions, they are here and ready to answer those for you. It was important for us to be sure that we share with you what we're sharing tonight are our considerations, relate some of the conversations that we're having, some of the areas that we're discussing. We don't have the set plan in place. We are meeting again as an advisory team on Thursday, and that is when all of the leaders will come together with what they believe would be the plan for their specific area. And then the advisory committee will look at those recommendations. We'll be able to really solidify what our plans are once we see and hear more specifically about each subcommittees. We know that so many are interrelated, that we're going to be going to the advisory with what we believe is our best plan, listening again to all of them, and then making adjustments accordingly before we share out what our final plan will be at the end of the year. So our subcommittee focus areas, first and foremost, it was perfect that Dawn started. Thank you, Dawn, for the information, because communication is going to be key. So as Dawn leads this committee, it's important to make sure that we are addressing and presenting information for all of our audiences, our students, our parents, and our employees, and that achieving the consistency and that clear district. We have been doing that since March. We've been trying really hard and circling back to that message. What is that message that we want to deliver? Make sure that it is clear and it is a message for the entire district. And then also making sure that the communication channels, the existing ones, continue to work. And then already her committee has looked at the importance of providing a parent website specifically to this task. And for that reason, they are developing it right now, and they will be sharing it out as soon as it is ready. But that will be it will begin with the information we have now, and it will be continuously updated and more information shared as that information is presented to it.
Dr. Newman, this is Mrs. Wood. Can I ask you, could you give us a brief description of what the subcommittee is, the representation on the subcommittees? Who's involved working on this?
Yes, I will. Thank you. And actually, I have my notes, so thank you for asking for them. I should have given those to you. The subcommittee is comprised of 15 members on our advisory committee. With that, those are staff, parents, and governing board members. Then the subcommittees there are 12 of them. There are over 100 members that are representative of the same groups. And then in addition to that, we have additional work teams. So we have about 20 individuals that do not sit on the subcommittee, but they are doing the work that then guides what those individual subcommittees do. and the decisions that are made. So essentially, we have 135 individuals that are providing and working with that individual process with the feedback. And then in addition to that, we circle back out to various stakeholders as we continue through that process.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Our whole child supports, that's why we're here. We're here for our kids. And so it was really important for Susie Cadena and her team is working on that. What is that social emotional learning and those trauma-informed practices that we need to be sure that we are ready? We have that tiered approach for our students. What will the identification of needs, and even more so, how can we do that quickly so that we can provide the supports for our students and our staff? Re-engaging the disengaged. We have some students who maybe did not engage, not maybe, we do have students who did not engage in our Q4 learning. And so therefore, it's important for us to re-engage them in this and in their learning, and as well as addressing the grief and loss. So Dr. Santa Cruz so eloquently put it, we not only do we have students that have dealt with COVID-19 and being away from friends in Q4 and suffering losses in that way, the world is looking very different for them and they're experiencing some things as well. And so it's really important that we have supports in place for them and we are able to do that. In addition to that, we are really pleased that we were able to already, thanks to our override, put some mental health supports in place for next year. So we have our social workers and our mental health counselors that will be at our secondary campuses. We continue to have the support of our social workers at our elementary campuses, and just being able to provide that continuum of care, K-12, elementary through secondary, and also continuing with our community partnerships that we have. And the third thing, as we're looking, and as that committee is looking at whole child supports, what is that professional development? What is the professional development being for our administrators, for our teachers, for our support staff? We have our behavioral health teams, and they are there. What professional development and what guidance can we provide for them as they're working with and supporting our students? And then also our district crisis team as they're engaging in various activities that they have. For academics, that's the committee that I, and actually Ms. Wood, you're on this as well. That's a committee that we are on. For academics, we're looking at that continuity of learning. We know that we need an accessible platform for our students and families. We know that we did our best in Q4, but it's important that we have a platform, almost like, as I mentioned before, a one-stop shop. So we are not having our families, our students, our parents, looking at all different kinds of apps, a compilation of apps. Well, we have some really great apps. We want to be sure that we're able to put that all in one place for them as they access. We also, as we look at the continuity of learning, we want to look at our curriculum. When we are looking at scenario A, which is where we know most of our parents and families and staff want to be back at school, it's important that we continue to use our district approved curriculum. It's important that we continue to engage our students in that. We also know that if we do have to move due to a disruption to a blended model, that we continue to also use that blended and that district approved curriculum with some online supplemental resources. And then lastly, with scenario A, we know that we have our Florida virtual curriculum through Global Academy that we have been using, and you'll hear more about that from Dr. Barton this evening. The committee also looked at addressing the learning gaps. So as we continue to remember and remind ourselves that our students did not necessarily progress in the learning as we would have wished, we need to be sure that we are looking at our priority standards. This work has really begun already back in March. And so as I talked about the work teams, there is the curriculum work team that has been working, knowing that this would be something that we would definitely be a priority for us. And so as we look at our priority standards, see which priority standards our students were not did not receive in-person instruction for during this closure. And then also determining with that, we know we're not going to take Q4 and we're not going to pop it into Q1 of this next school year. So instead, our team has worked on looking at our curriculum guides, looking at our scope and sequences, and saying, so if I know that students are going to be learning this concept in this school year, meaning the 2021 school year, what scaffolding do the teachers need to have in place for them to be able to progress at this grade level standard? So we want to make sure that we continue with the grade level that the students are in while providing those supports. And then also for the learning support and services, we look at that in two different ways. For example, in special education, we need to look at what does instruction look like for our special needs students, but also what are the services look like. Same thing with our students that are on 504 plans, our students that are receiving title services, and then as well for our ELL services. So we are really looking at two things for those. What are those learning supports, and then what those services are. And then John Casalhano is leading the remote learning technology team. The teacher training we know will be super important, whether that be the platform or the curricular pieces that we use. And also training our teachers on best instructional strategies for online learning, how to engage, we were just having this conversation, how to engage our students in a platform, perhaps if they have to move to an online or a blended situation. Parent training and support, training and information, and a lot of this will be able to be placed on our website for platform access, resource navigation, and then also strategies for student support. That's probably one that we really didn't address Q4, but we do know that that's important for us to do that for our families and for our students and for our teachers as the students keep, as they perhaps continue with their learning through the classroom work as well. And technical support, continuing to help our families to ensure that our students have access to the resources and the devices that they need. And then also distributing that device at a K-6, since our 7-12 students already have that. And looking at perhaps moving our insurance options that we provide for our families at the 7-12 level, offering some of those. Those are as a consideration that the committee is making right now. Do we want to offer some of that similar things to our K-6 parents? And again, that internet accessibility, working with our, both with our whole child support team and with our title team, and looking at the resources we have, like we did this past quarter, of seeing what funds are available for Title IV. So if our families do not have internet accessibility, how can we do that and support them in that way? Campus operational management is led by Jason Martin and Marcy Taylor, and they are really, this is the nuts and the bolts. These are the things that the parents and the kids are going to see. What are the schedules going to be like on a campus? What resources are needed for them? And really a lot of this is this campus processes and procedures. What is the classroom setup going to be so that it is providing opportunities for us to keep our students in a safe and healthy environment. When we have common areas, in our common areas, what will that movement look like? They're talking just even about students moving from classroom to classroom, students moving from a classroom to another area. Cafeterias, what will that environment be? Do all students need to eat in the cafeteria? So there's been some great conversation that they shared with us at the advisory committee, and even with us in our leadership meetings every day about some modifications perhaps can be made at that time so that we don't have a large group of students in a particular area. Playgrounds, what are playgrounds going to be? What are some of the access to our students getting some physical activity? Office areas, we know that we have our office staff, and what precautions and what procedures and can we put in place specifically for our staff, but we also know we have families coming in and we have staff. They love to come into the office and they love to, interact with their staff members that are in the office. And so it's really important to establish procedures about how they can do that and ensure that they are doing that in a way that is the best for all of our individuals at our campuses. And then lastly, cleaning, and that cleaning really ties directly also into the operations. That's just to the right of this section. What does that look like? What resources are needed? When will that happen? How will that happen? Who will be responsible for that? Those are all of the pieces that that subcommittee is working on right now. With operations, Bonnie Betts is leading this committee and looking at the financial impact, the CARES Act grant and how that money might be utilized. We know that it's going to cost more for us to this next school year just because of some of the things that we're going to be putting in place. Monitoring the funding, and that can also mean the monitoring of the funding for our ADM and how we're funded as a district for our students. And then just making sure that in the warehouse they have there's protection equipment for our staff, the cleaning supplies are available, and how does that translate when they need something. So putting processes in place so everyone knows where to get things, how to get things, and looking at how those are going to be paid for. Nutrition services, looking if there needs to be some modifications to the lunchroom. As I mentioned, these are all considerations. More specifics about decisions will be made when we talk later. And as the advisory team does provide additional information, and as when they look at our recommendations from a subcommittee, they'll be able to guide us as to where that might be. Transportation, the cleaning of the buses, making sure that we also, in addition to full cleaning of buses on a daily basis, also looking at hand sanitizers at the bus entrance. And also through a facilities perspective, providing and putting some ductwork, inline infiltration within, cleaning protocols and materials, making sure that what is the best protocol, how is it done, how often should it be done, who should be doing it, as similar to the campus operational management team is looking at some of those, and then also making sure that sanitizers are throughout the building. So for example, we just had a conversation the other day of, at an elementary campus, where are the important places to make sure that we have sanitizers? Is that the same at secondary? No, it's not. And so at a secondary, at a junior high, where are those places? At a high school, where are the best places for those? The next two subcommittees are led by Jared Ryan, and they really are, these two are interrelated, but they're also very, very different and unique. So our extracurricular looks at the athletics, our performing arts, our special areas, and also the activities that they may do. So here we're looking at the phased approach that he presented prior to that. We can look at some of the phased approaches that they've already looked at for athletics, some of the phased approaches they're looking as they're moving into some of our summer camps, and learning a lot from what they have already been doing and experiencing. And that really does help us get insight as to where we might do as we've tried to replicate some things in different situations. The other thing is too, for this area, this might be performing arts, this might be special areas. We just communicated today, CTE is one that, while that's not extracurricular, CTE does involve activities and things that look very different. So those are the components of that extracurricular committee. And then the programs, the before and after school, VIK, enrichment, preschool. Are we looking at a modification of a schedule maybe, or offering that option for parents? That's what they'll be considering. That's what they have been talking about in their subcommittee. Summer and holiday camps and specialized programs. Our employees group, this committee is led by Missy Udall and Sean McIntosh. This group really touches and is very interrelated to all of our areas, as you can imagine. First and foremost, looking at the susceptible personnel, making sure that they're surveying the at-risk members to gauge their intentions. We want to see who is able to return to work in the situation, like coming right back to our brick and mortar, wanting to be sure that they're maintaining confidentiality. They are consistent with our Americans with Disabilities Act and some of the other state privacy laws. It's important to also offer some accommodations, such as maybe an alternative teaching assignment. So as I mentioned before, as we look at some additional students perhaps going due to health reasons or others to online instruction, we will need to increase our staffing there. So a reassignment of staff in that way. Adhering to our FERPA and HIPAA requirements, adhering to state and federal employment laws, and offering that employee assistant program that we have, making sure that staff members continue to be aware of it and just remind them of the support that they can get in that area. For teacher certification, they are going to, and they continue to look at making sure that we're using appropriately certified teachers for the online scenario, for our in-person scenario, and perhaps for our blended. If we do have to move to a, due to a disruption, whether it be As I mentioned before, if students are absent, that might be our scenario for blended learning. Or if we become in a situation that's outside of what we can make decisions about, and our school needs to be perhaps closed for a brief moment for some time, then what types of reallocation of staffing can we do to ensure that we are supporting our students and our staff both, making sure that we have students and teachers in front of our teachers in front and staff in front of our students, but also that we are supporting them in their learning when they're working online. Staffing and adjustment costs, just to consider, is there a need for us to employ additional staff in certain areas, whether that be nurses, healthcare aides, custodians, full-time substitutes, and other employees, and what might that look like? And so as they gauge some of that and get feedback, for example, from some of our parents, again, we'll have to be circling back and see what their choices, based on the choices, what their options are. What do they want to choose and what is best for their student? And then that will again circle back to the employees so we can be sure that we are ready to serve them in whichever way is best for them. And determining the vacancy rate of employees. So if we do have a need for a substitute, or there's a vacancy in a classroom, making sure that we have that in place for all of our staff and students. Also, as we return to work, making sure that precautions and procedures are in place, allowing our vulnerable staff for health reasons to wear some personal protective equipment, establishing a process for check-in with vulnerable staff. So our administrators, there'll be a process for them to check in with those staff members and see if they're and help guide them with the questions that they could be asking so that they can best support the students or communicate needs back to that employee subcommittee group or to our Office of Talent Management. As well, they will establish a point of contact, local health department as needed and as appropriate. The next area that they are looking and considering what our processes will be is that return to the reporting of identified COVID cases with employees, whether that be establishing the procedures and training with school administrators, school nurses, and other healthcare providers, so that we can, maybe they have COVID-like symptoms, and what procedures in place to utilize and to remain healthy. Inform those that have had close contact with a person diagnosed with COVID-19 to stay home, follow the state guidelines and the State Department of Health guidance as well. There will, it'll be important to have an easy to read flow chart for employees so that when they know that they need to report a possible diagnosis or exposure, they have that readily available to them so they know exactly what to do and talk to about that. And then also to report those confirmed cases as appropriate. Our Families First Coronavirus Response Act and our American with Disabilities Act are, it's important to establish easy to follow guidelines for the employees who qualify, and also to inform and educate employees of their rights under those acts as well. So that would be our, all of the considerations, and obviously not an all-inclusive list. We learn more every day about some of the areas that we need to. So that will continue to grow, I'm sure, just as some of the others will. And they will work in close contact, not only with the subcommittees that I've already mentioned, but with health services. Jen Frost is leading that committee, looking at what our Department of Health guidance and CDC guidance is, what directives or developments occur and what is needed for that. And also to develop guidelines and protocols for district offices, for campuses, for their offices, as well as their classrooms. Making sure that students receive protocols. We're educating our students. We're providing protocols for treating our students and protocols for giving them more information about prevention. Same thing with that staff, that education, the treatment, and the prevention. Some of those will be put in place by this committee. Developing modeling education for students and staff regarding proper hygiene, whether that means signs and symptoms of illness, positive practices to stay healthy. And in addition to that, looking at protocols for procedures, just as the employee group will doing that, we'll be working with her and her team at what those procedures are for illnesses, what the procedures are for outbreaks, and what those prevention modalities, whether that be masks or barriers, are most appropriate for the various groups. our last two subcommittees, accountability, that's led by Brandy Burton, and accountability really talks about various types of accountability. For example, assessing student growth. We will not have spring 2020 instruction or assessments, and we won't have spring 2020 instruction. And so how do we assess where our students are and what they need? We know what we want to teach them. We know we have a plan for that, but what are we going to use in order to assess and provide information to our teachers to inform what that instruction will be? In addition, we know that for our teacher evaluations, there's an accountability piece related to part of that is school letter grade. And in absence of that, or in absence of a letter grade that is more than a year old, it's important to look at that. And so she will be working, and she has already been communicating, as I mentioned, interrelated work all of the time. She's working with Vicki Jones, who does a lot with our evaluations and does some of the guidance and development of, working with the Office of Talent Management as well. What would our evaluations look like in regard to some of those indicators? We learned that it's very, very different for in-person, in-seat kind of instruction and engagement. It looks very different when we're looking at virtual or online. And so making sure that we do provide some of that for them. Attendance requirements and reporting. Right now, currently, we report attendance differently for in-person and for online. And this year, the state did allow us to submit a comprehensive plan. And by submitting that, they allowed us to continue with our in-person attendance reporting. Will they let us do that later on? We know. And so it's important for us to be aware of that. In-person, brick and mortar, our students, we report attendance based on who's absent. That's considered negative attendance. When we look at online learning historically, and what we currently do for our AOI, for our Global Academy, is we're reporting the number of minutes that students are working on a course. And so obviously those are different. And so if we're moving from a brick and mortar and we have to move to a blended setting for a disruption, whether that be because an individual student or a group of students are no longer able to learn for the moment in time or for those weeks during our brick and mortar, can we still continue attendance reporting like we would just as if they were on our roster, because they are on our roster or are in person? And so those are some of the things that they'll be looking at and giving us guidance. With that, as you can only imagine, yes.
Related to that and student attending, obviously, as you stated previously, we are encouraging students who are showing any signs of health issues to stay home, or even if their family has potential health issues. Yet we tend to send letters home and track attendance if they're excessive attendance. How will we balance that, where we want students to stay home in certain cases to protect themselves and others, but we have limits on how many absences they can have?
That goes along with our next subcommittee and that legislative advocacy. We have talked about that. We talked about, so are we going to send that 10-day letter, right? That 10% that the students need to be, once they miss that, we generally will send a letter home to them. I think, and we've talked about, as the guidance is provided for our families, as far as when it's important for them, and as we educate our staff, when it's important for them to stay home, as you mentioned, that we are hoping will work in tandem with that. And then also looking at making sure that the legislators and our state officials understand that there will need to be some modifications and adjustment to that, because we certainly want our students to be healthy, and it's important for them to do that as well. With Dr. McCord is leading the legislative advocacy group, and that does tie directly into our funding. Identifying the needs, as we are all finding many of them, and communicating that, as he already has been doing, to our legislators. We want to be sure that we're getting full funding regardless of the service delivery of our instruction, and we will continue to advocate for that and ask for that as well. And also our school district and our accountability grades, our letter grades. we need to look and see, we have some things that are connected to that. So it'll be important for us to continue to communicate with Dr. McCord, as we do, of course, all the time, but communicate specifically about those things that we know we're finding hiccups that perhaps our legislators can help us out with that as well. Our timeline, we know we've been working long before June 20th, but our official task force work began in right at the beginning, end of May, beginning of June. There will be ongoing updates throughout June for to our families, to our staff, and also to all of you. June 30th will be our formal governing board presentation. At that time, that is where we will have a very, very clear plan in place for you. Based on, after listening to all the considerations, as I mentioned again before, we know as our subcommittees, as we're doing our work, what recommendations we want to make, but there's so much interrelated components to all of this that we need to go to our advisory, get guidance, and then go back and refine some of our plans. And so that's what we will continue to do throughout the month of June. And as I mentioned, there are, I'm obviously here to answer some questions, and we have all of our subcommittee leaders as well. So if you have any questions, I'm going to get out of this so that we can see everybody a little bit better, if that's okay. There we go.
Dr. New, not a question per se, but just an observation and perhaps a thought to consider. And that is similar to what we do with our special education students, where we have documented service hours and points of contact per student. If we can do that without being too onerous on the teacher and actually make it as automated or electronic as we can, just in terms of the accountability piece and the finance piece and how those dovetail, that we can document service hours per student somehow automatically as tracked by computer if we have to modify the attendance thing to some degree. Just a thought.
Thank you.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I have a question, or I have a few questions.
Ms. Humphries.
Dr. Newman, when we're talking about our extracurricular activities, specifically our music, choir, band, and general music, what are some of the protocols that they are discussing, as this is one of the issues that we have to deal with is the, when you're doing band and choir, you're producing more and greater volume of sound and more breath.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes, absolutely. So, discussing, we're fortunate to have members of both high school, junior high, band programs, marching band programs, particularly concert band programs, as we've discussed, kind of the size of the groups and the nuances of that. A number of things have come up, including the goal of reducing the number of instruments that are shared between members of different bands and musical groups. We've discussed not utilizing the same stands between members of the groups. One of the concerns that we have right now that we still need to address is actually where they store their instruments and go in and pick them up, whether we have them going in some sort of rotation or keeping them in smaller groups within their sections and whatnot. But Mr. Bennett has been kind of a leader for us and a voice for the group from the high school level, which has been great to learn from him and his perspective as the band director at one of our largest groups at Highland High School. And so we're addressing those. We have another follow-up meeting on Thursday. We were actually really excited about the governing board meeting tonight and to hear the questions that you all had and to kind of push us forward to finalize some things. But those are all discussion points and certainly things that we're looking to address to minimize the contact students have between one another. But certainly extracurriculars pose a unique challenge.
Yes, and they are very important to the students, and choir and singing has definitely been an issue in the church setting. So I think it's really important that we work to address those issues I don't want to see kids miss out on choir or band. I mean, it's a little different in orchestra. It's a bow. It's not your voice, but those who are using their breath and their voice, that's going to be something we really need to work on and resolve, especially if we consider wearing masks, because you can't play a band instrument with a mask on, and it may be hard to sing as well. Another question I had was just for the Legislative Advocacy Committee. Part of the thing that I think is very difficult for us as a board is we don't have guidance from the legislature and the governor at this time about the flexibility, for example, with attendance or additional funding, or what the funding might look like. How are you addressing those issues? Because you have so much you don't know, it's difficult to figure it out.
Bill, what we have done and what I'll continue to do is communicate with representatives, not just from the legislature, but other groups that represent ASA, ASB, as well, others who work on behalf of school districts. And like you said, there are not any answers as of yet, but I guarantee you they definitely know our concerns. Things that are being thrown around is funding us off of last year's, current school years, but for next year's 100th-day number, because we're very concerned about ADM dropping and being held accountable for COVID-19 and how it makes an impression upon our attendance on a daily basis. And a lot of things that Dr. Newman spoke about a few minutes ago, and a lot of other subcommittees, plays into what we would like to accomplish in terms of just making sure that all school districts are treated in a fair and respectful manner when it comes to funding. Again, and I don't have any indication that anybody in the legislature wants to do anything to damage that. We just want to make sure that we're continually in their ear and they understand that this is important to us. And, you know, another example is, how will online classes be treated? Currently, we're not funded at 100% for students who are taking online classes. And if we're forced to go in that route, or we have options for families because of health issues, or primarily if they don't want to send their kids to school because of COVID-19, they want a different route for them, how will we be funded for that? And we're pushing for 100% on that as well.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. And then just another one was when we talk about internet access, and I wanted to know kind of what percentage of our students are we helping to get internet access? Are we able to provide enough that we have 100% of students who want that? Or are we having some students who prefer using packets? How are we dealing with that? Did we deal with that in the spring with the remote learning, as far as having internet access or desiring packets?
Hi, Jill. So we don't have numbers on that. Since we are such a large district, what Mrs. Cadena, Mrs. Connor did was reach out to the schools, because the schools know best who really has access issues at home. And that's how we work that program with the Cox Connect to Compete. We don't have exact numbers on that, but we're going to continue to offer that. And now we can get access points, as to where before we couldn't. So that could be another possibility that my subcommittee is discussing at this time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I jump in on that just a bit? Not about connectivity, but the city of Mesa, I spoke with their city manager today, and their council has decided that with some of the money that they receive from the federal government for COVID-19, they are going to purchase a little over 400 Chromebooks for Gilbert Public Schools. And what'll happen is that we will purchase them, and they will reimburse us for those dollars used for that, which comes to about right around a little over $140,000. and that's for elementary schools that reside in Mesa. So a big thank you to them and for their efforts to make sure that even though we're Gilbert Public Schools, they recognize the fact that a third of our district is within the city of Mesa limits. And so again, thank you to them.
That is very generous. And I'm really glad to hear that they're being proactive in helping us out in that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McCord, and Ms. Wood, if you would extend our appreciation for that generosity and consideration the next time you see Councilman Thompson. We'd appreciate that.
I will.
Just one more thought. I do want to thank the committees for all the hard work. This is a lot of planning that we're doing in a very short space. And, instead of taking 2 years to do it, we're going to smash it into 2 months. So thank you to Dr. Newman and all of the committee members for that hard work.
Other board members, any questions or comments?
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Yes, Ms. Wood, go ahead.
So, Barbara, Dr. Newman, I had a couple questions. I noticed and have received emails about, I noticed on the surveys also the teachers and the parents mentioned the idea of would we have any reduced capacity in our classroom, or would we reduce the numbers in our classroom to kind of help with the healthiness in our classrooms? Do you have any comments on thoughts about that?
That would be our campus operational management team. Jason or Marcy, do you have any?
Hi there. We have studied that right now from our perspective. We are not proposing to do any of those things. We do know that possibly with some of the students wanting to go to online learning, that it could reduce the overall population in the classrooms with that. But as of right now, that is not a consideration just because of space and staffing and all of those other implications.
Okay. I think we need to, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say same. It's
Okay.
been a larger discussion with that committee for both levels.
If we could just keep that in mind the best we can. First of all, we've committed to having more teachers in our override. As far as, I think we have some ability to have that staffing. And then I think if that's something that's been mentioned by teachers and parents, if we can find any way to just have even just a little bit of reduction. And it sounds like we might just naturally is kind of the idea. But if we can kind of keep an eye on that and just see what we can do to manage that, I think that would be important. And then we received many emails and feedback and you mentioned it, Dr. Newman, that we want to take into account the health and prevention, but we also want to return back to school as normal as possible. Like, we received several emails about masks. We received several emails about different things like that that might be prohibitive to the wellness and the normalcy of school. I just, as you went through the health subcommittee, that was kind of mentioned, and I just wondered how can we have a balance? How can we try and, find a balance, the right balance of that?
The subcommittee is working on that to give that guidance, but we also, just as our guiding principles, we want to be sure that we are listening to what our families are saying and our staff is saying. Dawn shared, when she shared the statistics, our families really said that it was important for their students to not be required to wear masks. And so that will be that information will definitely guide some of the decisions that are made as well in relation, as you mentioned, to health services and Jen's committee.
Great. Just so that we'll take that into consideration. That's great. And I know we're all doing the best we can and trying to do this. I just wanted to make sure that was mentioned. And then finally, I just want to mention again, and I know we've talked about this in subcommittees, every single subcommittee has, just that we are mindful of our teachers and what we're asking of them as we, try and accommodate the best that we can and add different things on them. I just want us to be mindful that we are realistic and supportive in what we're asking our teachers in their classrooms, and not adding and adding and adding to what they're trying to do. They can focus on the students and the learning and those basic things, and not, there's going to be some, here and there, but just how do we best support them, be mindful of them and what we're asking of them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, any additional questions? Mr. Carr, Ms. Uggetti?
I would just like to, go ahead, Mr. Jetty.
No, go ahead.
I would just like to thank the committee and the various committee members for all of their work. I think, as has been highlighted, there is some consistent feedback that we're receiving. I spent some time really looking at the parent survey and the faculty survey, and certainly there are some consistencies there regarding the desire to have some type of health monitoring. Sanitation seems to be very important. There seems to be some real mixed feelings on different categories, and I know it's difficult to take into consideration the needs of all. So thank you. I look forward to seeing some of those recommendations, and I very much appreciated the comments up front that we recognize we're trying to balance the health associated with COVID as well as the mental and emotional health and physical health in other ways with these students. And as we said, it really is a focus on enabling the students to be successful. So thank you.
Ms. Uggetti?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for all that you've done. I think obviously and I think we're between a rock and a hard place. And, just listening to all the things that you talked about, looks to me like it's going to cost a lot of money to make all of it work. And at this point, don't know what's going to happen in terms of the legislature helping us out with that. So we just have to do the best we can do. And thank you very much for, for all the work that you've done.
Thank you, board members, and to all of the subcommittees, and to Dr. Newman and Dr. McCord. You are moving with all deliberate speed to come up with something for June 30th and make the appropriate recommendations. And again, I echo what this board has already stated. We appreciate the hard work and all of the effort that is going into getting us back to a sense of a new normal. Dr. McCord, we can move to item 2.02 on Global Academy. Your introductory remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. This next presentation will be headed up by Peter Barton, and I will let Dr. Newman introduce him from there, but this is directly related to task force work and ensuring that we do have options for children moving forward as we go into the fall of 2020. Dr. Newman.
Thank you. Dr. Barton, if you don't mind starting to share the presentation, that would be great. As Dr. McCord mentioned, this really is an opportunity for us to share with you, as well as to our families, what type of curricular options we do have for our students that will choose an online option or scenario. We also know that we maybe haven't always shared with you about Global Academy. I know we've done a couple presentations, but just for you to be able to see what our students see, what our parents see, and the type of curriculum that we're using. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Bartman.
Thank you, Dr. Newman. Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members, and Dr. McCord, thank you again for the opportunity to share what Global Academy looks like and what some options are going down the road. When we talk about Global Academy, there's really two components to our program. We have our curriculum provider, which is Florida Virtual Schools, and our learning management system, which houses our curriculum, called Agilix Buzz. So I'm going to kind of divide my presentation in half and show you what each of them looks like from both the student and teacher perspective, and go into just a little bit of detail about what we've done with each of our components here. So to begin, Agilix Buzz is our learning management system, and it is the preferred learning management partner of Florida Virtual Schools. So it's included with our Florida Virtual School license. Agilix Buzz is compatible with Google, which is obviously our district standard in terms of what students and teachers use. And then it's also compatible with Turnitin, which is an anti-plagiarism software. Global's been experimenting with Turnitin with good success this year, and I know several of our high schools use it as well. Buzz provides us some robust tools for content creation. It isn't just a place where Florida Virtual lives, but there are some tools which I'm going to show you that teachers can use to really customize their courses and personalize it for students, and also bring in some of the adopted curriculum resources that we have in our district. So in addition to those adopted resources, teachers are able to import content from every other Florida Virtual course within our catalog. So even if a teacher is teaching 9th grade algebra, if they need to bring in some content from pre-algebra, for example, they're able to do that very easily and bring that in from another class from our Florida Virtual curriculum. Through Buzz, teachers can also import curriculum from Khan Academy as well as Open Ed. So there's some resources automatically built into the system. And then obviously, like I mentioned, we have lots of adopted curriculum that teachers can link to or import. And we're researching ways on what that might look like specifically for all of our resources from kindergarten through 12th grade. Over the past few years, our technology team, as well as Global Academy, we've worked to really make Buzz a part of what we do in our district, especially for students and for parents. So for students, Buzz is right on their Rapid Identity homepage. So all they have to do is click that tile and press launch. We've customized our homepage, and we plan on customizing it further if we have to have a larger audience of students joining us. But we've tried to build out our social media. We've tried to build out some videos and training materials for students and parents. When students log in, this is the first thing that they see. And again, what you see here is pretty customizable, and we've put things up here that our Global Academy full-time students definitely need. Like I mentioned, I've been building out over the past few months a set of orientation videos so that any student who's never taken an online class before or who's never taken a class with Global has something to look at and model their first steps after. We really want students who are new to this to be able to jump in and get going as quickly as they can. Within Buzz, we have the ability for teachers to communicate with students and students to communicate with teachers. So there's a communication component built in that capitalizes on student email accounts, but there's the convenience of having the communication piece within our platform. Over the past couple years, I've developed a technology help page. All the questions that we get, all the things that we know that students need to know how to do when it comes to their Chromebook and online courses, it's all here. And we've compiled a frequently asked question page with screenshots, with videos, and helpful tips for students and parents. again, so that they have ease accessing our content and doing their courses. My favorite part of having a platform is the fact that when on students' homepage, they're able to see all of their classes in one place and get a snapshot of their current grade and their current progress. And they're able to see how much time they have left and they can click right into the course and go. Students and parents are able to see this and they can click on this. If you see the bar chart icon on one of those course cards, that takes them to a very detailed grades page, which I'll show you momentarily. When students click on or into that grades page, it looks kind of like a pretty standard progress report, but there's some important functionality here. First of all, if you see at the very top assignment, there's a little bubble, which indicates that the teacher has provided feedback. Our teachers are able to provide either written or verbal feedback to students on their assignments. And so all that feedback is compiled here in the grades page, and students can go back and look at that at any time. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see a set of due dates. The way that Global Academy is set up is that students are enrolled at pretty much any day of the year and can move through the course at whatever pace they need to. These due dates are a benchmark for students to follow in order to finish the course in that default 9-week time that we give them. In the way that Global's set up right now, students are definitely able to work ahead, and they can also turn things in past that target due date with no penalty. But we really wanted to give students a guide, and to help keep them organized and help their parents keep them accountable towards finishing their work. The best part of this grading page is that there's a lot of information embedded when you click things. So students, when they click an exam, for example, that they've already taken, they can see the questions that were asked. They can see what answers they got correct and what they got incorrect. They can see how much time they spent, teacher feedback. There's just a ton of information and analytics built into every single assignment that's available for students to view once they've completed that assignment. Students also have access to a comprehensive to-do calendar. So this calendar lives within Buzz, and the beauty of it is that it shows all of the assignments across all of the different courses that a student's taking. So at any given time, a student can head over to the calendar and see exactly what assignments are due that day. So it's a great way for students to stay organized. They can even, in terms of personalizing their calendar, they can even set their own blackout dates. So we have students, for example, who are professional athletes and are going off to world championships. And if they know that they're going to be away from the computer for a week, they can block out on their calendar and everything will readjust for them. So I think that's a good way for students who need flexibility to be able to do that and not lose their organization. I wanted to highlight our Google integration. Buzz is able to integrate with Google Docs and Google Sheets and Slides and all of the productivity tools that our students and teachers are able to use. One of the popular features of Google Classroom that our teachers love is the ability to create a template in Google and push it out to all students so that students are working off of the same document and turning in something that's consistent. But it's also giving students an idea of what the expectations are and what they clearly should be producing. Well, Buzz also has that ability. And so within Buzz, teachers are able to create templates and push those out to students when students are ready to do those assignments. On the teacher side, it's a very similar interface. Obviously, the first thing that teachers see is a little icon on their front page that just tells them how many assignments currently need grading. And when teachers open that up, they simply get a list of the assignments and a little interface to enter points and provide oral or written feedback to the student. We can also customize the landing page as much as we need. As you can see, I've put up a couple resources for our online teachers that they need pretty much every day. Our teachers also have access to a pretty robust editor. So this is just a glimpse of it here, but this is essentially a drag and drop tool. So if teachers want to move things around, it's just as simple as clicking and dragging and moving it to a different spot. You can see the eyeball. That's where teachers, if they want to hide or make things visible to students, they can use that function. This is a list of all the things that teachers can create within Buzz, and that would be in addition to the Florida virtual content that already lives there. So on the left, you can see kind of static resources that teachers can add, everything from files that they've created to YouTube videos. And on the right are all the different kinds of activities that can be created. And as you can see, several are collaborative and interactive. Everything from blogs to discussion boards, surveys, and wikis. But the most powerful piece is at the very top, called the library. And the library is where teachers can import lessons from other Florida virtual classes. They can import content from OpenEd and Khan Academy. So really, they have access to a lot of resources right at their fingertips and can import them through the library. Here's an example of just a couple basic customizations that my full-time teachers have done. My full-time teachers, they're a part-time basis, so we really don't expect them to do a lot of modifications to the curriculum that's already there. So what they do is customize their classroom and really make it a place where students get to know their teacher. They're able to access their content information or contact information. And some teachers have even gone so far as really providing more direction on assignments that are there and giving students specific things that they need to do and just some help in addition to what Florida Virtual tells the students. Other features that we provide through Buzz, we provide parent portal accounts to all parents if they have students who are taking a class with us. And that parent portal account gives the parents access to everything a student sees. Parents can do everything except turn in assignments through their parent portal account. And so we really value that transparency. We want parents to be partners with us and supporting their students. And so we want to give them access to everything so that they can use it. We also, through Buzz, are able to provide parents with email and text alerts that are pretty much instant. Parents can be texted or emailed when their student's grade falls below passing, or when the teacher grades an assignment, or even when the student turns something in. Students can also get those notifications as well as if they opt in to do that. From a more district level and even at an administrative level, we are able to run detailed reports on activity and grades and mastery, and we're able to align standards to whatever activities are built in the Buzz shells. So next I want to flip over and talk about Global Academy's curriculum provider. Florida Virtual School is a not-for-profit entity. It's actually a school district, a statewide school district in Florida and completely online. And so they have teachers developing their curriculum and engaging in a cycle of refreshing and updating that curriculum. So a Florida Virtual course will get updated every couple of years, which is great. The curriculum does meet standards. It's Advanced Ed, which is now Cognia accredited. And it meets the Quality Matters standards. So it is very high quality. It has lots of engaging activities, lots of rigorous texts, as you're going to see. And I wouldn't say it's the easiest option out there, but it meets the standards of Gilbert Public Schools. We purchased a 6th through 12th grade license beginning in 2016-17. Global Academy is always, or at least as long as I've been there, been 7th through 12th grade, so we haven't really used that 6th grade component, but we now have the possibility to do that thanks to you. We're also interested in taking advantage of the kindergarten through fifth grade license, which has been piloted for over a year, even by some districts, even in the valley here, and became available for public consumption on May 1st. We are not the only school district in Arizona or the greater Phoenix area who use Florida Virtual. We have about 5 or 6 districts who are joining us in exploring the kindergarten through fifth grade curriculum, and really exploring how it would work. And I'm collaborating with them on what are some best practices that we can put in place to really meet the needs of those students, because it's going to be quite a bit different from our secondary crew. This is a pretty typical Florida Virtual lesson. I chose a lab biology class on classification of living organisms. As you can see, it's a pretty friendly user interface. Students have access to a glossary. In many courses, they also have access to some videos that will help them practice essential skills, or brush up on something that they might have forgotten from a previous class. The next slide shows this is the same lesson. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how much content is packed into these lessons. And it's not just reading, it's not just videos. There's interactive materials, there's virtual labs. There's lots of things that students engage in before they have to produce something and to show their mastery. A typical Florida Virtual unit is laid out like this. You can see those icons that look like blank pieces of paper. Those are actually the lessons. So students spend the most of their time engaging in those lessons and practicing, and then move right down the list into their assignments. So you can see quizzes, you can see drop boxes for students to produce work and turn it in for feedback. You can also, in our units, you'll also see discussion-based assessments, which are designed for students to have conversations with their teachers and really verbalize what they're learning in their course, and showing their teacher that they're indeed learning the material. I wanted to show you a glimpse at the elementary curriculum. You can see that the user interface is definitely more elementary friendly. And Florida Virtual has even integrated more tools for students, including a text-to-speech tool that's built right into the curriculum, as well as quite a few more resources for elementary teachers to scaffold learning for students. Lastly, I wanted to share the catalog offerings. At the elementary level, we know that the curriculum will provide core classes, and I've also seen electives, including physical ed, technology, Spanish, and visual art. At the middle school level, we again have core classes as well as some credit recovery classes, and our elective offerings are a little bit broader, including PE, reading, study skills, Spanish, coding, and art. And then at the high school, our course offerings are quite a bit broader. We have a full suite of on-level core classes. We also offer some honors classes. And then our electives include PE, languages. We have several languages that we have the capability of offering. We have technology classes, including a few in-depth computer programming classes. We have art history, as well as social science classes, including psychology. The catalog also includes curriculum for pre-calculus, which we currently do offer, and AP classes, which we currently do not in the full-time setting. I wanted to note that those pre-calculus and AP courses have an added cost of a virtual textbook that we do have to purchase when students enroll in that class. That's really what I wanted to share. I'd love to answer any questions and share my experience further.
Dr. Partman, thank you very much for that presentation. One question I have is, in your view, how difficult is it for the educator at the brick and mortar facility to transition to a global kind of service?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Santa Cruz. What I have found is that the functionality that teachers have learned within Google Classroom is transferable to the Buzz environment. Buzz has many of the features that are found in Google Classrooms, and the tools look very similar, but Buzz does offer a little bit more. And I'm excited about the possibility that teachers would be able to bring in potentially resources that would supplement our adopted curriculum. So, I think there will be some transition, but I think it's doable because our teachers do have experience in that Google Classroom environment.
Thank you, Dr. Bartman. Board members, any additional questions?
Dr. Santa Cruz, if I
Go
can
ahead,
ask.
Ms. Wood.
So a couple thoughts that I have. One, could we go through some type of a curriculum approval process, or at least as before or in conjunction with looking at the elementary addition to this global academy, especially if we're going to offer that to our students as an option?
We definitely, Mrs. Wood, we definitely would. Not only would we want to provide some presentation and some opportunity for them to look at the resources for us to get feedback prior to the students beginning, but also we would be able to, for sure, continue to go through that process of answering questions and providing additional resources for them to look at and to ask questions during that time that we are implementing.
Okay, and that would be sooner than later,
right?
If we go this route. Great. I was thinking about it, and I thought, could we almost, if this is the route that we're going for the online, to include the elementary students as well, could we, like you said, post presentations, maybe open up some of this so parents and families can see, kind of almost have like a tour. You know how we have those tours of the schools and stuff? Could we have kind of a tour of Global Academy to give people some idea of what this will look like the best we can? And I know with the elementary, you mentioned, Dr. Martin, that it would need to look different than the secondary because there needs to be more, hopefully, teacher interaction is what I'm guessing. Is that what you would anticipate?
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Yes, absolutely. I think when I envision elementary, I think that there has to be a significantly higher level of teacher interaction with students. Obviously, there needs to be a lot of onboarding with students and parents at the start of a course so that parents are comfortable supporting their student and the student develops a sense of autonomy with the platform. But, I think it would be imperative that the teacher is communicating, if not once a week, perhaps more, because online curriculum is it's a different way of learning. And for students who've never been exposed to that or maybe have less of a sense of individual organization and motivation, the teacher definitely needs to have a larger role than perhaps we do with the secondary.
Well, and in addition to that, kind of some feedback that we've received as well would be people would appreciate, especially if we can hire more full-time teachers, families would appreciate more interaction in general, even with secondary, that it's a daily or a video class that you join in here and there, or regular hours that your teacher will be there. Just a lot more of that hands-on interaction, maybe more of a hybrid feel. If we can work toward that, I think would be a really good addition. Again, I know we're trying to put this all together to provide this option, by August, but just maybe if we keep that in mind as we keep working toward that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Finally, another suggestion that I'd heard too is, could we look at offering rolling start dates, especially for secondary? Maybe in providing more, and tell me if maybe this is what you already do, but I don't think so. Like every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, a course would start, so that, or two courses, you could start every couple weeks rather than just by the semester.
Thank you. Yes, we actually enroll students pretty much every day of the year. So, and we get usually 100 plus enrollments a week. And so we enrolled immediately the next day because we want students to get in and going.
Oh, great. So you could, if a student's already involved, if they finish their class, they could start a new class as they go. Okay, that's great.
That's what we encourage.
Just the summer school has specific start dates, though.
Yes, and that's a result of we have to have a certain calendar with summer school, especially this year, the way that the state is funding us. So yeah, and we have a lot of pieces that are happening at the same time as summer school is. A lot of technical things that our technology services office is doing in terms of rolling over to the new year, getting everything set up for the next year. So we have to somehow have kind of an end date for that summer school session so that we can make sure everything's ready to go for day one of the school year.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate that you're working toward all that flexibility. And I know that you have, how many students do you have enrolled for summer school this year?
We have 3,200 students.
Wonderful. How's it going?
Very busy, but so far so good, I think.
Thank you.
Board members, additional questions? Doesn't sound like it. Dr. Newman, Dr. Bartman, thank you for that presentation. Dr. Newman, you've been very busy.
The team has been extremely busy for sure. Thank you for that, Dr. Santa Cruz.
Sorry, Dr. Santa Cruz, I do have some questions. I forgot to unmute my mic. So could I go ahead with my questions?
Too late. Go ahead, Ms. Humphries.
Well, I'm learning technology too, and doing the Zoom thing, I have to remember to unmute myself. So I did have a couple of questions. I really appreciated seeing the curriculum. I know that when we upgraded our online curriculum, that this was a much better option than we had previously. Are we able to help students finish? Are we getting a better percentage of students who are finishing their courses and going through to completion?
Yes, over the past couple of years, and especially leading into this year, that was a priority of mine. So one example that we just launched is that we have a referral system for teachers. If they spot a student who's struggling, they can fill out a referral, which goes to our staff, and we're following up with students immediately. And that's intended to really target students that could, in other ways, fall through the cracks, and just really making sure that we're helping them and making sure that they know what they're doing and what needs to happen next.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that because I know that sometimes with online in the past, it has been more of a struggle to make sure that students finish the class and complete it so they can get that credit. So I really appreciate that that's a priority and that you're working on it. The other question I had also had to do with teacher interaction. If we have students completing the course at a time that's convenient for them, and then teachers reviewing the assignments or working on that course at a time that's convenient for them, how do they overlap or how do they communicate when there is an issue or the student needs help from the teacher?
So our model is asynchronous, right? Where they're not usually matching up in terms of the time that they're working. Our teachers work extremely hard to try to connect with students. We have teachers who create videos for students who ask a question so that there's some personal interaction and some direct answers to the students' questions. We have most of our teachers have a voicemail line set up so that the student can call, leave a message, and expect that the teacher will call them back. And so, it's hard because our teachers are also teaching during the day, right? They're doing this part-time and kind of doing the best they can with the time that they have. But I can tell you that our teachers really are there to help students and are doing their very best to connect with them, even at all hours.
That's good to know. I appreciate more information. Also, what kind of a ratio do we have students to teacher when we're considering how many teachers we need to hire to help these students in their coursework?
Can I jump in on that one, if that's all right?
That's
Yeah.
fine.
That is what the committees are looking at right now, because we know that there will be some teachers that will not perhaps be able to work within the brick and mortar setting. And so the reallocation of their or their reassignment of them to the Global Academy, that will also provide, that will be their full-time job. So they will be working during the day while our students are working. So that will be a little different than what it was previously, because we've had teachers working part-time, working really, really hard to support kids, but working part-time. So we're looking forward to that opportunity. But what does that look like? What does that load look like? That's what the committees are working on right now.
Okay, and so when we did the summer school, the virtual summer school, did we pretty much use the teachers who would have taught summer school at the brick and mortar to do the online classes, or how did we scale that up?
So I used obviously the online teachers who were slated to teach online, and then hired the brick and mortar teachers as needed. So we weren't able to hire all of them, unfortunately, but we were able to get quite a few to come on, especially in social studies, where that's by far our most popular subject this summer.
Okay, all right, thank you for your answers, and thank you for the hard work. I know I've really seen the difference since we've been able to adopt this curriculum and how much better it's been for students, and to hear that they're doing better at completing the work and getting that credit, that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. Anyone else? Doesn't appear so. Dr. McCord, anything for the good of this particular session?
No, just want to thank Dr. Newman, our task force committee members, and Dr. Barton. Wonderful job, excellent explanations about what we're doing and how we're moving forward.
Okay, it appears that we have reached the conclusion of this work study session. We're at item 3, which is adjourning this work study. I have had a request in the past to take a brief break, so we will take a 5-minute recess and begin our brief board meeting after that. It is currently 8:17. Thank you for your indulgence. We will reconvene. And is everyone back? We will shortly know that. We will call this brief board business meeting to order. Mrs. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Here.
Ms. Laurie Wood,
Here.
Ms. Sheila Ujeti,
Here.
Ms. Jill Humphreys,
Here.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Here.
Mr. President, all board members are present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. We are now at item 5 of the board meeting agenda, and we are ready for reports. Dr. McCord, item 5.01.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. It's that time of year again when we start talking about next year's budget. And tonight we have Ms. Bonnie Betts and her crew to propose the 2020-2021 budget. Ms. Betts.
Good evening, Dr. McCord, Santa Cruz, governing board members. So I wanted to let you know that as, first of all, Jackie Matten and Pat Donahue are on this call or WebEx with me. As the three of us created the presentation this evening, we wanted to provide all the information to you that has been shared over the last couple of months, but as I go through the presentation, we will go through them fairly quickly as you have seen them. I thought it was important, though, that we have a lot of the content there as we are posting the meeting notice for the public hearing to be held 2 weeks from now. So the public will have all the information as well. So to begin, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Nope, that wasn't it. There it is. Okay, also before we get started, I wanted to let you know that through the last couple of days, we have made some modifications to the presentation, and I will point those out as we go through it. And these, so this revised presentation will be posted tomorrow morning to the board meeting agenda. So to begin, we're going to stick primarily to the maintenance and operations budget and the unrestricted capital budget. However, there are some notable items associated with some of our other funds. I wanted to share that with you. And also I wanted to share the risks and opportunities in these very difficult times of trying to figure out what the start of school is going to look like and which of our students are going to attend. So I thought it was important that we at least talk a little bit about those risks and opportunities. And finally, to share with you the estimated tax rates. We set the tax rate in August, and the tax rate is set based upon this proposed budget. So first, this is all of the introductory information that we've shared in the past, that the proposed budget is fully aligned to the strategic operating plan. And as Ms. Wood has already indicated, we did make some commitments during the November 2019 override and bond, and all those commitments are also reflected in this budget. So to begin, what is our proposed maintenance and operations budget capacity? All these items are consistent with what you've seen in the past, except for the teacher experience index. So we did have a small decrease in the teacher experience index to 1.0214 from 1.025. Again, we talked about this earlier about the ADM, that we are anticipating a lot of ADM. And then the other notable difference from what we've seen in the past is the fact that we were expecting increases in classroom site fund, but in fact saw a $9 per student decrease. So to reflect all of that, I wanted to share the the differences. So starting with the fiscal year 2020 revised number 2 versus the 21 projected, which you've seen in the past, as well as the 21 proposed. Most of these items are consistent, except you can see on the TEI where the TEI decreased for this proposed budget to the 1.0214, and also the classroom site fund. So in the current year, we are receiving $434 per weighted student count. We were projecting $465, $40 more per student, and we ended up with $425 per weighted student, a reduction of $9 from the prior year, but a reduction of $40 per student from what we anticipated. So all of those parameters are reflected in the final budget capacity or available monies we have to us here in Gilbert. The good news is we've been able to make some modifications to some of our projections. So when we gave you the 2021 projected budget this spring, we were assuming a total increase year over year of $19.4 million. And we still are at that total $19.4 million. The most notable change was in the budget balance carry forward. The revised number 2 of the current year was a $9 million carryover. We projected a $10 million carryover, and we now believe that we will easily reach the $11 million carryover, which does offset the $900,000 loss in the classroom site fund contribution that you can also see in the 1, 2, 3, 4, in the 5th row down in this table. So before I go any further, are there any questions about any of this?
Ms. Betts, Dr. Santa Cruz, could you remind me why there's been a reduction in the classroom site fund contribution?
So the JLBC, that's the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, makes an estimate of those revenues every spring. And in fact, they were about a month delayed this spring. It's due directly to the COVID. So when everything shut down for a period of 3 months, the sales tax revenues were greatly decreased, and classroom site fund is nearly fully funded from sales tax revenues.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
Dr. Santa Cruz, I had a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphries.
I do believe this is probably the first time I've seen a decrease in the classroom site fund in the time that I've been on the board. So is that then a decrease to the teachers? Because I don't know that we'll be able to make that up with the other issues that we're dealing with due to COVID-19.
So with an abundance of caution, we did decrease the dollar amount per teacher associated with pay for performance, but we have no intention of decreasing the classroom site fund portion that's in base salary. And we're actually hoping that we will be able to use a little bit of the budget balance carry forward to maybe further close that $900,000 gap. So we have some opportunities with budget balance carry forward in both 11 and 13.
All right, I appreciate that. I know it's difficult because we've got a lot of things on our plate, but you know, we want to help our teachers. So thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Please continue, Ms. Betts.
You bet. Thank you, sir. The next section are the spend increases. So we've shared this before, the non-discretionary budget increases and decreases, and you can see the total increase projected is 1.33 million. Note that that does include the lesser need, the potential lesser need of FTE associated with the 400 student loss. So again, $1.33 million projected. Also, again, as Ms. Wood indicated, we of course have made our maintenance and operations override commitments. These have not changed. Class size reduction allocation of $2 million. That represents about 25 FTE of teachers. The social emotional supports that we've been talking about for some time, which is divine intervention, knowing that we will absolutely need those given the environment that we're in right now. And then finally, to retain and attract high quality personnel. Note that the total dollar amount of those commitments is $18 million. but we're only expecting about $11.6 million from the override. So obviously we're taking additional state revenues into consideration to meet the M&O override commitments as well. So I would like to spend a little bit of time on this, employee excellence. So these are the 4 parameters that we've shared in the past, just to share that all functions of Gilbert Public Schools contribute to the achievement of our students. All employees, regardless of their role, contribute to the achievement of this vision. So our strategic operating plan is to retain and attract high quality employees in all portions of our operations. And so we really strove to make sure compensation increases are as consistent as possible across all employee groups. So those 4 parameters really gave us some information about these details about the salary increases by job class. So our teachers, the 5% pay increase has been prescribed pretty much by Governor Ducey with the 20% by 2020. And in addition, again, to striving to keep the teachers in the classroom, we did back 2 medical days and added $200 to each teacher's base. And then we applied the 5% pay increase to them. Support staff, due to the compensation study that was done largely by OTM and all the efforts that they have made to make sure that we're analyzing salaries of all of our employees. We did make substantive increases to grades. We've made equity adjustments to many of our employees. And then we made the decision to add 4% on the base on top of that. That particular issue addressed the compression associated with the minimum wage increase. But the overall salary increase for every support staff will be a minimum of 5%. And then finally, administration and other professionals, again, moving everyone to the new minimum and plus a minimum of 4% on the base. Every single individual will get a minimum of 5% regardless of their circumstances. So that leads to that concept that all employees are very important to meeting the needs of our students throughout the school district. So,
Bets, can I ask one question about that? With our increase, our minimum wage employees, they automatically get an increase each year. Do they also get the 5% on the base, or just the automatic increase written into statute for them?
We did make a recommendation that our minimum wage employees are minimum wage employees and would be eligible just for the minimum wage increase as each year passes. The idea is that their minimum wage jobs, we'd like to encourage them to move into other higher paid jobs. So we did make that decision this year as well.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And then, Dr. Santa Cruz, if I may ask Ms. Betts.
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
We talked about this before, but just want to clarify since we're presenting it all tonight. With the salary study and with these recommendations, we feel confident that we now have competitive salaries offered for each grade of employee, competitive with our surrounding districts and other things like that, correct?
So yes, we have definitely approached the competitiveness. We are probably a little bit under competitiveness in some areas of our job classes. We had always anticipated that we would be addressing the competitiveness over a 2 to 3 year period, depending upon available resources, but we made a huge dent into becoming more competitive. And we believe that it's setting ourselves up very positively to go into 2021 year.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Go ahead, Ms. Betts.
Okay, thank you. So now to balance the budget, you can see the total budget capacity increase is 19.4 million. The class size reduction in social emotional supports is 3.81. The non-discretionary increases are 1.3. The teacher compensation increases with the sick leave buyback is just over 7 million. Our classified hourly increases are just over 5 million. And finally, our administrators and other professional increases have increased by 1.9 million, leaving us with a fully balanced budget for the 2021 school year. Before I go any further, are there any questions about any of that? Any further questions?
That was quite diligent of you, Miss Betts, and it is no magic. It's just hard work.
Thank you. Not just me. Ms. Matten and Ms. Donahue played a big role as well. So thank you.
Dr. Santa Cruz, if I may ask a question or make a comment.
Please go ahead, Mr. Carr.
Thank you. Ms. Betts, thank you for all this information and summarizing things that we've been discussing over the last several months. Do want to point out to the public that in that teacher compensation increase in sick leave buyback, by buying back those sick days, as you indicated, the effort is to encourage our employees to be in the classroom where they're most effective. But it also has the effect of putting an expense of the current year into the current year and removing it as a liability if they were to carry it forward. So we're helping reduce cost in the future.
That's correct.
Second, and you talked to a little bit the assumption going back several slides driving the budget, and you don't need to switch slides, but is that our enrollment will decrease by, I think it was 400 students, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
We do point out that this last year we bucked the trend. We are very hopeful that we will continue to buck that trend and see an increase, which would mean that we would have additional capacity within the budget if that happens. But taking this conservative approach, especially with COVID, and we don't know if people will be hesitant to come back, and so many, we don't know how they'll fund people who do a hybrid or an online enrollment this year. So I appreciate that conservative approach, and I express to our audience and to our public and to our parents, we want to serve you and we want to earn your trust, and we want to continue to reverse that trend as we have this last year. So thank you to you for this presentation, and thank you to the parents who are supporting us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there any additional question?
So, so this next slide is a very important one. We are required to post this to our website, and it's also on the very front page of our proposed budget. It's definitely a summary attributable to Governor Ducey's 20% by 2020. So we recalculated the average salary of all teachers employed in fiscal year 2020. So this is the current year now, at $52,446. We have increased that by 5%, the pure calculation, because we really don't know what's going to happen this summer and which employees are going to be here or not. But you can see where the percentage increase is 5%. The average salary of all teachers employed in fiscal year 2018 was $46,761. So now when we calculate the change from $46,761 to $54,884, it represents a 17.4%. But we know that the total percent salary increase awarded by the governing board since 2018 is 18.5%. So what's the story? Why is it not the same? And also note, this is one of the slides that was modified. Coming into the 18-19 school year, I had thought that the pay was 9.5% for teachers, but it was 9%. So on the posted presentation, it shows 19%, but the actual amount is 18.5%. So to go back to that story, how do we explain that story? So I'd like to go to the next slide. So we took an example teacher in elementary, high school, and junior high. And these were 3 teachers that were here in 2018, still here in 2021. So we looked at each of them individually, and then we looked at their average. So you can see when you look at the average salary, the overall percent increase from 2018 to 2021 for these particular 3 individuals that have been here all 4 years, it was 18.69%. which you would expect for 2 reasons. It's above the 18.5% that you know that we awarded, but also the 18.69% reflects the additional $200 put on the base for teachers for next year, as well as the compounding effect of giving a percent increase in year one, and then that dollar amount going up, and then the percent increase in the following year is giving a percent increase over the increase you did in the prior year. So it's a compounding effect. So the 18.69% is what you would expect. So what that says is that when we look at the average salary globally, this is the average salary district-wide. Every year we calculate the average salary in the spring. During the summer is when all the retirements occur and when all the separations occur. So you can assume that we have many higher cost teachers that are retiring in the summer, some as high as $65,000, $70,000 that are going to be replaced over the summer with a teacher between 48 and 55,000, say, where you can see where those savings would occur due to that. So that particular occurrence on an average basis across 1,800 teachers results in the calculated percentage of being 17.4% instead of an expected 18.5 or 18.7%. So are there any other questions regarding that? My hope was to make sure that we clarified that, and this came out of our discussions with the leadership team yesterday.
Mrs. Betts, I do have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphries.
Thank you. The question I have is the percentage in FY 2018 was 9%, but I believe the governor was also counting the percentage, the 1.2% that was given in 2017, so that came to 10% for 2018, and then the 5% in 2019 and the 5% in 2020. So I believe that if you added in that 1.2%, and maybe you could do that for us and send it to us in an email or something, I think that would clarify that we're much closer to that 20% than we realize, even though there was one year when the teachers accepted a lower percentage so we could give that a little bit more to our support staff.
So I don't remember that detail in particular, Ms. Humphrey. However, the actual page on the adopted budget shows the reference year of 2018. So it doesn't. So it is true that the governor used the base of 2016-17 to do this, but the major, if you remember, he was up 10% going into 19, 5% going into 20, and 5% going into 21. And so from his standpoint, the base year was 2018, and that's what's on the proposed budget.
Okay, but I do remember him at the time, including that 1.2 that he previously given, so that's fine.
Okay.
Dr. Santa Cruz, if I may comment.
Go right ahead, Mr. Carr.
And I too recall, as Ms. Humphries does, that there was the 1% from the previous year before his plan that he included in that. But I would also call out that the governor's plan was based off of a state average, and each district received based on the state average of a teacher's salary. Because we were already above the state average, we actually received less than the 20%. Even though this board has decided to do all it can to meet the 20%, even while we're receiving less than that. So
that is correct. That is definitely correct.
Dr. Santa Cruz, if I could add as well.
Go right ahead, Ms. Wood.
Going along with Mr. Carr, I just wanted to say, so I just want our public to know and our teachers to know, every penny that came from that 20% by 2020 that came to us from the governor has gone to teachers. It just, like Mr. Carr mentioned, we didn't have that full 20% for our teacher average, but we've given everything we've had and more, as well as added in and expanded that definition of teachers, because it is that important that we could have that salary increase and provide that for our teachers. So That was my adding as well.
And
Thank
I
you.
wanted to share your point too, Ms. Wood, the fact that our teacher definition, so the governor's teacher definition is the classroom teacher. We did expand the teacher definition to include our technology integration educators, our academic coaches, our librarians, and our counselors. So, so the counselor position, the technology integration educator position are all really higher level positions, and our promotional opportunities for our classroom teachers. So all those have played a role in why we're not at that 20% or above it. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Betts. Anything else? Ms. Betts, did you have something else?
Nope. I'm moving on to the next slide.
Okay.
Apologize. I should have already put this on the presentation. Sorry about that. So I'd like to move into the 2021 proposed unrestricted capital budget. So this is the calculation of the budget capacity. You can see the parameters there. You can see that we are anticipating a budget balance carry forward of a little bit less. We do anticipate earning some interest though in the current year in unrestricted capital. And then because the reduction, so you can see the district additional assistance adjustment is going from -5.2 to a -2.5, giving us an additional about $2.6 million. In addition, you can see that the budget increase over fiscal year 2020 is $2.8 million. So that's reflective of both the reduction in the cut to the district additional assistance, as well as the occurrence last year where we actually saw an increase in students. So the district additional assistance is calculated based upon prior year average daily membership. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. And then as we go into the next two slides regarding the unrestricted capital spend, please know that our intention is to prioritize unrestricted capital through a zero-based budgeting process. We do treat unrestricted capital as a one-time revenue source, so therefore should go to one-time expenses. So in year one, you might have a situation at Highland High and Gilbert High where they need to replace baby grand pianos, but they won't need to replace them next year. So that would be a one-time expense that would not be repeated year after year. But we don't want to give them the same amount of money if they don't need it. So maybe that additional money would go to Campo or to Mesquite High in a subsequent year. So going to the next slide, these are what we would consider non-discretionary unrestricted capital expenditures. So keep in mind that unrestricted capital is also used for what we used to term soft capital items. So instructional technology, as well as business technology, such as our iVision software. You can see that we've got Infinite Campus up there as well under the various software licenses that are district-wide. Those are ongoing expenses that we need to account for annually. Note the curriculum ongoing plus the one-time for science kits and the English language acquisition adoption for 712 that is planned for the 2021 school year. It is plus some special education testing increases. It's about a $1.86 million increase to curriculum. Again, that is a one-time expense increase though. Because we're only going to adopt a 712 ELA curriculum in 1 year. We're not going to adopt every single year. So the subsequent year, we might adopt a social studies curriculum as an example. Assessment platform and ongoing assessment costs is a $30,000 increase. As you know, you've approved a new assessment platform. I think it was in the May meeting. And so that increase is accounted for here. Global Academy, we just had a presentation of the Florida Virtual Curriculum Platform. That is an increase of $360,000, allowing us to expand to K-5, as well as to expand to a site license, which in the long run will save us money. As an example, in the current year, we were budgeting $125,000 or $150,000 for global, but we had such an increase in students wanting to use the Global Academy platform primarily this summer that our cost is really going to be closer to $300,000. So that's just an example. Also, that Global Academy expansion is on the board agenda for your approval tonight. And then finally, in transportation, there's a decrease of $1.5 million, an ongoing $200,000 expenditure for the ongoing various equipment costs associated with replacing engines or air conditioning compressors on our buses. The decrease of the $1.5 million, as you know, you've approved the remodel of the building G. And in addition, you also approved the replacement routing software, leaving Edgelog and going into Tyler Versatrans. And then finally, instructional materials. We did make an allocation for instructional materials in the current year for performing arts, physical education, and art. And we believe those are important to be ongoing. These are instructional materials such as even a play pamphlet or music needed at the high schools for whether it's choir, band, or orchestra. So all those things we would consider non-discretionary and ongoing for a total of just under $8.5 million. So as you saw on the prior slide, though, we have over $15 million available to us. So moving, shoot. So moving to the next slide. So these are the items that we would talk about on that zero-based budgeting prioritization process. So a total available is about $6.5 million. So these are the items on the list. School marquees. It's my understanding that we have 4 outstanding schools that do not have an electronic marquee. That will probably be prioritized going into the 2021 school year. We have performing arts needs. Over the last 2 months, our high school performing arts staff members, to include stage needs, orchestra needs, band needs, performing play, theater needs. They received a Google document to identify all of their ongoing needs or replacement needs or whatever it might be in terms of capital for all of our performing arts district-wide. And we have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with Karen Coleman to start the process of figuring out how we're going to collect these needs and how we can set them up for prioritization for the leadership team. Ongoing needs for athletics, and then finally general school capital needs. All those things will be requested and vetted through a process to determine how the remaining $6.5 million will be spent. So that's all I have on the unrestricted capital. I wondered if you had any other additional questions before I move to the next couple of slides.
Board members?
Yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphries.
I just want to mention that when we talk about the district additional assistance, we have not totally received the amount that was cut in over the past few years, starting in 2009, but some of those cuts were made more recently. And this is the first time in 8 years that some of these things have made it into our district additional assistance budget because we've been using it to meet other needs. So while we are a little leery of what's going to happen next year with possible cuts because of the economic downturn, it is nice to see us actually have some funds to put towards these very important needs, including pianos, which will be is on our consent agenda later. And those are really important needs for our students to have the kind of education we all desire, that they come out with having had leadership experiences and opportunities and develop their talents. So thank you very much, Mrs. Betts.
You bet.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Ms. Betts, please continue.
Okay, thank you. Darn it. So now to go through and talk about the other funds. So classroom site fund, we have talked a little bit about classroom site fund. So the budget is just over $24 million going into 2021. It does include $6 million of carryover funds, providing Gilbert with some flexibility in moving additional salary out of M&O to classroom site fund. So our goal this summer is to maximize the amount of M&O carryover to give us as much flexibility and as many available dollars to help mitigate some of the risks that we will talk about on the next slide. Instructional improvement, a budget of $3.1 million. Last year it was $1.5 million. And this is reflective of carryover in instructional improvement that we have captured catching up with our cash reconciliation process. This has given us an ability to hire the instructional improvement coach to the benefit of all of our students and staff members district-wide. That FTE is fully funded out of instructional improvement. Title I, due to the work of the federal government and the CARES Act, they're allowing another year in which we can carry over all of the available unspent Title I dollars. So we believe this will give us more flexibility also. The CARES Act, we are working on getting that application completed. We anticipate that we will spend about $500,000 in the current year to offset the additional cleaning materials that we've had, to offset possibly the loss of revenue in community school, those kinds of things. And so we've budgeted $1.8 million in the CARES Act for next year. And then finally, the bond fund, you all approved the resolution to sell additional bonds late July, early August. So we've included those amounts in the bond fund. Any questions on any of those?
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Betts.
So again, as I shared, this budget does assume a loss of 400 students. Could be more or could be less. There's lots of questions about, is the state willing to fund us at a full FTE level for our online students? Presently, our full-time online students are funded at 95%, and our part-time online students are funded at 85%. So we don't know whether we're going to see an increased loss of students. A positive or opportunity, vacancy savings nor turnover savings are identified. So turnover savings is what we talked about when we talked about the average teacher salary, where in this year we might have a $70,000 teacher that's retiring and being replaced with a $50,000 or $55,000 teacher. Those are turnover savings. Vacancy savings are associated with those positions that might be open for a month or two. And so we budget a full year's worth of budget, but we don't need to spend a full year's worth as we're trying to fill the position. This also assumes a $0 decrease in indirect fund revenue. It's a question related to whether nutrition services and community ed will be able to make the contributions to the indirect fund they've made in the past. And then finally, we have started to quantify the increased costs associated with cleaning, personal protective equipment, et cetera. So some of that is still a question as to how quickly will we go through the supplies, additional monies will we need out of the CARES Act as an example to offset some of those costs. So then finally, to move into our estimated tax rates, as I indicated before, the proposed budget informs our estimated tax rate that we would set in August of 2020. So in doing that analysis, we're sharing what our fiscal year 2020 tax rate is, and you can see the total was $5.9 million. The November 2019 election pamphlet indicated that our total estimated tax was thought to be 0.46%. The change over prior year is about 56 cents. However, the estimated tax rate, which does include the Class B bond sale that's expected to occur in July or August, the total is $6.25. Change over prior year of an increase of 35 cents or a 21-cent decrease from what we estimated when we passed the election in November of 2019. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Betts, and thank your team members. Any additional questions or comments?
Mrs. Betts, I do have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Humphries.
So if we have someone who's looking at the previous chart where you showed the tax rate, they could figure out their approximate tax liability by their assessed value of their house, and then timesing that. This is per $100, correct?
Yes. Yep. Per $100 value. Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Ms. Betts, once again, you've been very clear and very judicious, you and your team, with the information and with the presentation, and we appreciate the hard work.
Thank you.
Board members, anything else? If not, we will say thank you, and we will move to item 6, the consent agenda. Item 6.01 is approval of the consent agenda. Board members, we entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I think that was Ms. Uggetti.
It was.
Any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none, I will ask Ms. Wilson to please poll the board. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed will signify by saying nay. Ms. Wilson, please continue.
Lori Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Sheila Uggetti,
Aye.
Ms. Jill Humphries,
Aye.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. We will move to item 7, action items. Item 7.01 is the advertisement of the FY 2021 budget summary and hearing notice. Dr. McCord, do you have introductory remarks, please?
I do. Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. This approval will allow the district to advertise the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget summary and schedule a public hearing on Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020, at which time administration will make a presentation to the governing board and the public. The advertisement will appear on the Arizona Department of Education website. The call for the public will be held on June 23rd, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. for consideration of the residents and taxpayers of the district.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. Board members, you have item 7.01 before you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Any discussion? Seeing, go ahead, Ms. Wood.
With this being a call to the public, how are we going to accommodate that?
I think that Dr. McCord will have some instruction and some recommendations for us after our vote.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Hearing and seeing none, item 7.01, advertisement of the FY 2021 budget summary and hearing notice is before you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say nay. Ms. Wilson, please poll the board.
Ms. Lori Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Sheila Uggetti,
Aye.
Ms. Jill Humphries,
Aye.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Dr. McCord, do you have recommendation for us relative to Ms. Wood's question?
I do. Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members. Because this is a budget item and I think it's important that we make ourselves available in person with appropriate distancing within our meeting, like we started off during this whole process in March. And if the public wants to come in and have any thoughts about the proposed budget, I believe that having that face-to-face meeting will allow for that.
And board members, I would concur with Dr. McCord's recommendation and would also support the idea that we have a board meeting in person on the night of this budget hearing. Any questions or concerns?
I have a question.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Ms. Humphries.
I have a question. Would this be a resumption of in-person board meetings? Or is this just one night of an in-person board meeting due to the public hearing?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. McCord.
My thought is that if we continue to adhere to the social distancing guidelines, that we would continue to meet face to face.
And so we would step back into what we had done previously for board meetings, rather than doing.
That's correct.
I'm a little concerned because the numbers in Arizona are spiking, but I think as long as we have sanitation and social distancing, and I may wear my mask.
I think that would be appropriate. I believe that Dr. McCord is prepared to offer the community instruction and information relative to how we will conduct the meeting, where we will conduct the meeting, and how many folks will be in attendance at the meeting.
I would also like to add that if at any reason, just like when we open up our schools, if there are board members who are out of town for whatever reason or don't feel comfortable, you can always call in telephonically. And we will make arrangements for that to happen.
And board members, I would open you if you have some strong concerns after this evening's meeting, given the recommendation and my endorsement of that recommendation, please make contact with Dr. McCord and discuss your concerns. We'll move to item 7.02 on action items, approval to purchase the grades K-12. Commentary.
Yes, sir. Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members, to assist GPS in providing an online curriculum platform for all students as an additional educational choice, it is recommended to expand the use of Florida virtual online curriculum platforms to grades K through 6 to upgrade the license to a site license, avoiding the per student charge. We also have Dr. Newman here to expound if you have any further questions during your discussion.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. Board members, item 7.02 is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Udetti. Item 7.02 is on the table. Any discussion?
Dr. Santa Cruz, I do have a question. Upgrading this to a site license so we don't have to go on a per student basis, how much of a savings is that for us?
Dr. McCord?
I believe we are saving around $135,000. Is that correct, Dr. Newman? You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. There have been overages due to the additional licenses. We had been encouraged for several years to go to this as a savings, and we had not, and it makes sense.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. So how are we anticipating to pay for it? I know it was part of our unrestricted capital, but we are hopeful that this will also have some funding per student through the state, some ADM toward this. Or does the funding for the student go to cover the teachers? This is just basically the license for the expanded program.
Correct. Mrs. Wood, this is, and Bonnie, please go ahead.
So one of the things that we were not sure about is we are engaging in a K-5 curriculum platform that we have not engaged in before. So is that going to be one time or is it going to be ongoing? So it is possible that we would consider paying for the K-5 license out of exact money, depending upon the other priorities. It is possible that that particular dollar amount could be set by some of the CARES Act money.
And so this is just a one-time work. This is a contract for 1 year.
Correct. We have chosen to engage in just a one-year contract for the purpose of just finding out if this is going to work for us. Yes.
Okay, great. And then just, if I mentioned it before, Dr. Newman, if we could put a plan together for a curriculum overview or curriculum review. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely, we will.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Board members, any additional? Okay, seeing none, item 7.02 is before you, and those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say nay. Ms. Wilson, please poll board members.
Ms. Lori Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Sheila Ujetti,
Aye.
Ms. Jill Humphries,
Aye.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. We now move to item 7.03, approval of vacation days in excess of the 2020 Memorandum of Understanding allowances. Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members, it is recommended that the governing board approve the vacation days accrued in excess of the 2019-20 allowances as outlined in our memorandum of understanding be rolled forward to the 2020-2021 school year and are to be used prior to December 31st, 2020 in lieu of rolling to sick time by July 1st, 2020. Each year, those that accrue vacation days and don't use them and they're in excess of the allowance, we required and have required those to be rolled to sick time. But because of COVID-19, because of the inability for most of the staff being unable to utilize those days, we didn't want to punish them, and we wanted them to give them the opportunity to utilize those at least for about 6 more months. Assistant Superintendent of OTM, Mr. McIntosh, will answer any further questions.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. Thank you for that introduction. Item 7.03 is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Board members, any discussion?
I have a question. What happens, Dr. McCord, if, because of circumstances with COVID-19, perhaps this fall, people aren't able to use their vacation? I mean, March getting shut down was pretty unexpected, so we really don't know the fall might bring.
We would roll them over to sick time at that time. Those that aren't, we're just pushing the deadline back to December 31st.
And then if for some unforeseen reason you might need to roll those back again, we would do that.
If we feel we need to revisit it for unforeseen circumstances, we will definitely bring it back to you as the governing board.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Thank you, Dr. McCord. Any additional question, commentary?
Dr. Santa Cruz, if I might.
Go ahead.
Just could you give us an example, Dr. McCord or Mr. McIntosh, of some of the employees and typically what they would use, when they would use this time, and then what the circumstances have been with COVID, specifically why that hasn't been a possibility?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Normally during March, April, and then the summer, these are our 12-month short and 12-month long employees that accrue the vacation. That's usually when they take them, is over the course of the summer, with the inability because of COVID and operations, maintenance, custodians, et cetera, working hard to clean the buildings and keep them safe for hopefully the start of school year. They don't have the ability to take the vacations that they would normally take. This would give them an opportunity to roll it forward for 6 months, take it over fall break and over the winter holiday.
Thanks. And thanks to those employees for their work.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, then we will move 7.03. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed will say nay. Ms. Wilson, please poll the board.
Ms. Laurie Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Aye.
Sheila Uggetti,
Aye.
Ms. Jill Humphries,
Aye.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. President, you have 5 ayes.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Now move to item 8. We are at adjournment for this brief board meeting. I would like to thank staff and the board for your patience in moving through this agenda. It was quite significant in scope, and the business was important, as they all are. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Item 6.01, adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. And with that information, we will take a voice vote. We will not bother Ms. Wilson. Board. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say nay. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. I believe all members have had the opportunity to vote, and we are adjourned. We thank the public for their attendance. We thank board members for their diligence and work, and we thank all staff and Dr. McCord for their hard work in preparing us for this board meeting. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for everything. Have a good night.
Good night.